You're listening to My Inner Teacher with Peter Sterios and Krystal Ariel. The answers you seek are within you.
Welcome, Ken and Pam. This venture that Krystal and I, Inner Teacher podcast, My Inner Teacher, we have been inviting people that have kind of broke from the pack and created a path that is innovative or just listening to some inner guidance system. And whether it's an inner voice, an inner teacher, divine presence, intuition, and we're expanding the community that we're talking to include people like yourselves that are operating businesses and working in very competitive environments and still have these commitments to soul and commitments to kindness. I spent some time looking at your link that you sent me for your employees, and I want you to talk all about that. But before we get there, I'd like you to start from kind of the beginning. Like, what was your beginning in hospitality? What was it that the beginning showed you that you thought you could do it better or you could do it more holistically? What was that process?
Well, sure. Do you want to start us off?
Go ahead.
I can start us off. Well, first of all, you said My Inner Teacher. Pam told me this was the My Octopus Teacher podcast. Is that not the case? Okay, I'll try to wing it on the My Inner Teacher.
We will talk a lot about humor, Ken. And that joke right there is what my daughter calls a dad joke.
Yes, I'm really good with the dad jokes, which means Pam has to explain that I'm trying to be funny most of the time. So your question was, how did we get into hospitality in general, or specifically this slightly more entrepreneurial adventure that we're on today?
Well, no, I mean, all our guests come, and sometimes I even ask them, like, when you were a child, were you thinking differently than everyone in your life, in your family, in your friends? Were you one of those kind of problem children in your family? That's kind of the level. But we have no format. It's just a casual conversation between friends that don't know they're friends yet, or they are friends, and we become friends on the show.
I love what you just foreshadowed there. Maybe we'll start with the problem child element.
Sure.
And it dovetails really nicely into, or sort of leads us to where we are today. And also, I think one of the reasons why Pam and I are successful as a married couple and founders of a company that is in and of itself a major undertaking. I think we've got some insights as to why that might be working well for us.
Great.
So starting with the childhood, when I was a kid, and there's a great quote by Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, about if you want to understand the entrepreneur, understand the inner juvenile delinquent. And I was never a juvenile delinquent, just to be clear, but I certainly spent my younger years in my room quite a bit. And I think back to that book by Maurice Sendak, Where the Wild Things Are. And I think about how Max, the lead character, was sent to his room because he was acting out and he was very spirited. And he, as a result, developed such a great imagination and new worlds and adventures and so on through his imagination itself. And so I would say the starting point for me was this, number one, always questioning authority, always challenging traditions and norms, and the inner voice in my own mind was saying, yeah, I know my mom said I was supposed to walk the dog, but I don't think the dog needs to be walked today. The end result was I would be finding myself in my room a lot. But it was that inner voice, the very early start of that inner voice was telling me to challenge the long-term norms that people tend to adhere to without really questioning them.
Fantastic.
I wouldn't say mine was as colorful as Ken in his room, but I grew up in upstate New York in a wonderful space with lots of opportunity to get outside, skiing in the winter, getting on the lake, water skiing, sailing, boating. Just really, as I reflect back on what's important to me now, I know that that's the fabric that makes up who I am today. Had great friends who all enjoyed being active. And so I think having the seasons and knowing to learn to have grit when you drive to high school and, hit 3 snowbanks and turn around and spin the car and get to keep going. There's certain things that I so appreciate and reflecting upon and growing up. So I've had a lot of reflection this week. It was my birthday this week as well. And I just enjoyed breaking out some old albums of growing up. And, something I had to do in high school was summarize kind of your life. And it's fun to look back on seeing that now and how that carries forward.
So, Pam, my birthday was yesterday.
It was.
And I really get along well with other Tauruses. So,
Yeah,
so welcome. I didn't know you were part of the Taurus family.
Thank you. Yes.
It'll come out during today's conversation.
What sign are you, Ken?
Capricorn.
Oh, nice. Oh, we're all earth signs in here.
Yeah.
So I actually have this needlepoint that my grandmother did when I was born, and my kids were saying, wow, that's kind of forward for the time. And she wasn't, a hippie grandma or anything. It was kind of interesting, but we were looking at all the signs and who's what and within the family and all those dynamics. So super fun.
Fantastic.
And isn't today a special day? I can't remember. It means something. Sure. Today is our anniversary.
Yesterday was a special day. It was May Day.
Yeah, May Day. Today is our anniversary. We've been married for 47 years.
No, we have not.
How old are you guys?
I'm not good with math. It's probably not 47. How many years?
I think she was teasing because that means they would have been married when they were 12, and that doesn't.
Yeah.
But we've been married for quite some time, and today's a really important milestone. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Congratulations.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's say you find yourself in this corporate world, and that kind of nonconformist child is starting to get impatient with the way things are being done in hospitality, or you had a other corporate background as well, right?
Yeah, both of us, we met in graduate school, at MBA school, and learning how to be corporate titans, as you said, and navigate that whole corporate environment. And amazing experience. We both worked for Marriott International. We worked in different hospitality companies. Pam stopped at one point to raise our 4 children. And then we came back together when we formed this company. But what we've both found from our professional experience is we had a great grounding, right, in how things are done well, great access to incredible talent, whether it's legal or consulting or investment banking, what have you. We also learned from our industry that there are many aspects of hospitality, especially as it relates to how modern consumers have evolved, that weren't really, it was sort of a function of how this mature industry is set up. The big guys don't necessarily have a huge motivation to take risks and to innovate and to change their business plans to meet the needs of modern consumers. So as we spent years working in the industry, we identified some patterns and some emerging trends that were well suited to a new company like ours to come in and make a difference and sort of meet the needs and the value systems of modern conscious travelers when they go on the road.
Fantastic. It's definitely what attracted me to your hotel in Mendocino.
Oh, yeah.
And learning more with Courtney and the people that I met of your staff in Mendocino. I don't meet hotel staff like that anywhere where I travel. Like helpful, went out of their way to make me comfortable, was following through, like almost pushing me to kind of get organized for them so they could promote. And that just is wonderful for a provider of content, to have that kind of enthusiasm. Thank you.
Wow. Well, thank the team, right? Yeah. And I would say I thank Pam because one of the things that we do uniquely here at Soul Community Planet is we really strongly emphasize culture. We start with the values, and Soul Community Planet is a different way for saying healthy, kind, and green, or well-being and connectivity and stewardship of our planet. That's the genesis. That's the foundation. Those are the values that underpin everything that we do at Soul Community Planet. But the way that those come out and are embodied in the folks like the people that you interacted with, Peter, when you were in Mendocino, it comes through this process that we call the culture cascade. And Pam, I'd love it if you could spend some time on that one. She's our head of ABC, Awareness, Brand, and Culture. And the amount of time that we spend on culture is different from many businesses. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've made such a difference with a lot of people who have chosen not just to stay with us, like the example that you just provided, but people who have chosen to work with us and join our community and be part of something that's bigger than just a paycheck. So maybe talk about our culture cascade.
So my background is in marketing, and I just really enjoy the psychology and sociology. And so carrying that forward in where we are today, it was super important starting a company at this time in my life and our lives to have purpose-driven and to make a difference, and make a difference in the sense that I hope that anybody that comes to stay with us and anybody who comes to work with us takes away that out into the world, and they create that ripple effect of that psychology that you just talked about, Peter, of that welcoming. And one of the concepts we have in our culture practice is Ubuntu, and I just love learning about, that we are all connected, right? And there's many words for this, and this was pre-COVID when we were putting together all of this. So, not to put emphasis on COVID, but the fact that the whole world really realized, right, that we are connected. What you do on one side of the world affects the other side of the world, and now carry that forward. And now many more people are focused on taking care of self, taking care of their communities, taking care of the planet. So that genesis of the brand in 2018, naming it Soul Community Planet, was very intentional. And as Ken said, those are long words, so we summarize it as healthy, kind, and green. But there's so much depth in each one of those words, and it's concentric circles. So, everything, that you talk about with the inner teacher, starting with soul, right, in that concentric circle in the center is so important. It's the old saying of put your oxygen mask on first. And so what we're doing with our teams is having concepts, having discussions based on lifelong learning, quite frankly, for all of us. Whether it be talking about awe, and how they could teach a team member to guide a guest to go out and, just notice the tree there, or go out on an adrenaline-filled, zip line up in one of our properties, things like that. There's a lot that goes into it, and every time we talk about it, there's so much more to learn from each other. It's not that we're talking at people, so I so appreciate that you had that experience. And I hope that carries forward for those folks who are on the property, and obviously for you, having had that experience with us.
Chris, I have one more thing, and then I know you're dying to talk. Going through your little booklet, the digital booklet that you sent, that Maya Angelou, I'm going to read it here. At the end of the day, people will not remember what you said or did. People will never forget how you made them feel. And that I've heard many times, and I live my life that way, in a way that it's really that experiential feeling. And in the practice of yoga, what I've learned after 45 years of practicing is this capacity to feel has improved. Like, I'm able to feel more deeply into things with more intimacy, more connection. And that's what I feel when I was in Mendocino at your resort, that your staff had that. And it's really interesting how many similarities there are between your business model and my career, let's say, or my what I do for a living, teaching people how to feel and connect inwardly. And this was also, I was really happy to see that one of your, I forget what you called it, it was part of the mindset maybe, that kindness is near the top of your recommendations or encouragements for your employees and your guests. And that is ultimately the essence of a yoga practice, that if you're not becoming a kinder person through the practice of yoga, you're probably practicing the wrong style of yoga, because there really is no way to escape. The more you practice yoga, the kinder you get.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting, Peter, the book that you're referring to is called The SCP Way, and a book is a expansive term that doesn't really apply here. It's 16 different chapters, though, of different lessons, if you will, or practices that talk about how we endeavor to team members, as well as the guests who walk through our doors. And the name of it is the SCP Way. We were originally going to call it the Tao of SCP, but then we thought, well, we don't want to go too far with, appropriating that particular name. But the intent is there, and the underpinnings of that book are very similar to what you find with Taoism. And I just love what you said a moment ago, how your path and sort of the path that we're on have sort of fallen in this natural flow based on the way they were supposed to happen. And that's how we think about the SCP Way book and how we behave, and this idea that kindness is innate, that people all want to be healthier and have a more wellness-centered lifestyle, and people all want to care for our planet. We're part of this planet, and deep down we have this innate sense of stewardship for our planet. And so all that comes across. I'm not saying that what we do is easy or the way that we interact is necessarily the path of least resistance, but we know it's the right path, and that's the whole genesis of the term SCP Way. And I think some of the comments that you just made really tie back into that very well.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, my turn. You guys, I just want to say you are so inspiring for me personally, because
Wow.
I work with my husband, Israel. We're co-founders of Retreat Builder. And that whole thing started because I wanted my own retreat property. Like that was my dream, to have my own space. We've pivoted kind of away from the property and into just more like enabling retreats and putting together amazing retreats. And I remember Peter saying, "Yeah, you gotta meet these guys. There could be some kind of connection here." And now I'm seeing it. But like Pam, your background is in marketing. My background is in marketing. That's kind of the part, the culture and the values. And so when I was reading that, I was like, it's like we're mirrors. And then Israel is all into Taoism, and he carries like the business, and he's the CEO. And it feels very motivating, invigorating, inspiring to know that you guys can be so successful by modeling these things that in the corporate world, basically they tell you that these things don't lead to success. You know, it's like following the business plan, having having money at the forefront. Of course, you need it, but just like doing everything from that place is what gets you there. And one more thing I'm going to say is I like to listen to podcasts before I come on with guests that we don't know. And I listened to this one, it was two guys, I can't remember their names. I think they were in Texas. And they had said they went to one of your hotels, and it was the first hotel they'd ever seen that had like two garbage cans. It had like a regular garbage can and a recycling garbage can. And there were plants everywhere. Yeah. And that you guys truly embodied all the things that that you say on your website. It wasn't just something that you say that you didn't actually do, and how you help like the local areas where you have your hotels, and that you've helped like over 117,000 kids and families and hospitals. And yeah, I literally was to the point of tears. I was like, oh my God, they have done it. And I can't wait to talk to them and ask them like, how did you do that? Hey, quick note. Peter's Inner Teacher Academy is launching soon. If this is resonating with you, head over to innerteacheracademy.com and grab a spot on the wait list. These trainings are intimate and space is limited. So if you want to be first in line, tap the link in the description below and sign up.
You can also see details about my 2025 retreats at some incredible locations around the world, like Iceland, Austria, California, and New Zealand. Attendance at these trainings will count towards in-person hours for the Inner Teacher Academy. And now let's get back to the magic.
Wow. Those are great comments. Real quickly, I want to let you run with this one, Pam, but one of the things that is on our website, and it's painted on our walls, is the SCP code, which is sort of the values summary of the values that we live by. And the second to the last one says, we accept that we will never be perfect, but we'll always strive to improve. Because when I hear anybody saying, oh, well, you're doing everything right, which is not what you said, but I think about my list of 1,000 things, and Pam's probably got 2,000 things on her list that we need to do better. So it's so encouraging and inspiring to hear somebody reflect on the few things that we are getting right. We always see that there's just so much more that we can and will be doing as time goes on.
I'd love to just expand on the code that he just spoke of, because it just kind of a fun story. So we went in San Clemente, California. Here, there's a surf museum that they had a some historical talks at, and we were there. And one of the inspirational speakers there, his name's Sean Thompson, and he was a pro surfer in I think the 70s. And he goes around the world speaking to schools, corporations, individuals, any groups. And his book was I Will. And fast forward, he recommends that everybody write 12 lines of code. So I will, one of his was I will heal. Another example, I will paddle back out. Like he had some it's a very personal, and he encourages, school kids and adults, anybody. And it was really inspiring. We went home and decided that we wanted to put something in the current, dated as an affirmation. So put it lines of code for our company and face it where guests can see it and team members can read it. So it's kind of a manifesto. You can use all the different semantics you want for different companies, but it really does matter. And each line has many, many core elements, product elements, service standards with it. But the line stands for itself. So as Ken noted, we are perfectly imperfect. And so that was one. We have fun is another one. We provide, there's a lot of different lines, and we could share that with you. And that was something we read every week in the culture practice, the digital book that you read. That is, somebody signs up and somebody reads that. So it's kind of just repetitive affirmations, if you will, as we know that works, and just to truly embody that. So I so appreciate what you said. I'm really curious what podcast that was. So that's kind of fun.
Let's ask Krystal. Can we ask you, how is it working with Israel? How have you and your husband found being entrepreneurs and partners in your business? And then we'll see if ours compares.
Well, we've been together. It'll be 9 years in November. So not 47, but
neither have we.
We've tried to put together a couple of businesses in the past, and there's a lot of growing pains. And I think just in a relationship of two people just getting to know each other, dealing with each other's traumas, each individual having to emotionally mature in their own way and want to be better, want to improve, want to evolve. And just finding a partner that inspires you and is constantly learning and challenging you, so it's never boring.
Yeah.
And so I would be lying if I said that we haven't been through some rough moments, but we're now in a place.
Didn't you say 9 times you've been to the edge the other day?
we've there's been a handful of times where I'm like, that's it, I've had enough. No, but we've gotten past that, and it's like, look, we both want the same things. We both want to be with each other. Let's just figure it out. And I don't know.
Sharing that, Krystal, is so important. I know this isn't a how-to podcast on how to build your own business and so on, but I would encourage anyone, if they have the opportunity, and we all have that opportunity, to try to build a business with your spouse. It is exactly as you said. It is not this fairy tale where everything is flawless and harmony exists at every turn. It is really, really, and there are so many spectacular disagreements that we have, and differences of opinion and hard feelings at times, and it's all part of the process. And we always come back to this idea that we're building something really special. We're really proud of it. The intent and the genesis of this business is right. And whether it succeeds or not, we're bound and determined to make it succeed. When it does, we're going to be able to look back and say, man, that wasn't easy. That was hard, and have that much more pride and gratitude and frankly, growth from the process. So it's very lonely because there aren't that many people who are foolish enough to start a business with their spouse. And so to hear somebody else who's doing the same thing, and to hear that you guys have also gone through these trying moments it helps me. So I appreciate you saying that.
But it's worth it, right? Because at the end of the day, there's nobody you trust more than her.
Right, absolutely.
So you just used the word, Ken, lonely. And lonely is a great adjective for choosing to look inward, because it's not mainstream. When I wrote my book, which was supposed to be a yoga book, I soon discovered it became a science book, and it became all these other kinds of books all wrapped into this container of yoga. And this idea of the inner teacher was part of the lineage that I learned yoga going back 4 or 5 generations back into India, of teachers who were innovators, who took traditional ways of thinking about yoga and innovating them to make them more accessible to a bigger audience. And it just continued to my generation, where my teacher was also an innovator, and he basically kicked me out of the house to say, go off and innovate, don't follow me around. His exact words were, it's time to get off the tit. And so he had a certain way with words, you know. But when Krystal, Israel, and I started talking about my Inner Teacher podcast, the idea of that decision to move inward, the perfect icon for a logo was a labyrinth. And so the designer in me started messing around with images of labyrinths, and that's how we came up with this little icon that you see. And I don't know if you see it in Krystal's screen, but there's only one decision to make in a true labyrinth, and that's the decision to enter. Once you get in, it's not a straight path to the center. It's a zigzaggy, changing direction, turning around, going the other way. And that's business. And my experience running Manduka all those years, ultimately, it had to be fun. If it wasn't fun, there were many things I did that weren't fun, but it was a means to get towards fun. And as long as I kept that idea that we're moving towards enjoying what we're doing, then that was the right decision. Whether it made money or not, that was debatable. And I mean, there was something about risk, and this is what I wanted to ask you guys, and you too, Krystal, with your businesses. This inner voice is saying, this feels right, but the risk of jeopardizing your resources, let's just put it that, mental resources, emotional resources, physical resources, your family, how do you, it's almost counterintuitive. How do you make that choice?
Well, counterintuitive or counter-societal, I think we as a society, think about America in general. America is one of the greatest, countries on the planet, one of the greatest societies. Forget about what you hear on the polarizing news stories and so on and so forth. America itself is founded on risk. America is founded on letting go of the deep end and figuring out how to swim. And I think that sense of entrepreneurs and that sense of taking risks, and that they should be calculated risks, of course, but that sense of taking risks and the value that can come from that, even the value of failure, is something that over the last few years, it feels like we've sort of lost sight of that. I think we as a society tend to way overestimate the consequences of failure, the consequences of taking risks. And I would love to see people kind of follow the examples that, Krystal, you are leading, and Peter, you're leading, and we're trying to lead as well. That is, put yourself out there. You're not going to have all the answers. There's not a perfect owner's manual when you start a business, but here's how you take it from, step 1 to step infinity, even though there's a billion books that say that they tell you they have all the answers. You have to figure it out as you go, and you have to take those risks. And I like to think of this metaphor: when you're lost in the woods, you don't need to know how to get out of the woods. You just need to know where you're going to put that next step. You just need to take that next step and just keep going.
I think for me, belief is a huge thing. So if you believe in what you're doing, because there's times when you're, okay, this is not easy, this is so hard. But then I always come back to belief, but I believe in what we're doing. And it's not for everybody, for sure, meaning the risks, also the health side of what we're trying to do. But I always go back to when you know better, like personally, you want to do better. And once you know that, then you can't unknow that. And so it drives me a lot. I referred to Ted Lasso when they put up the word believe, and they smack it, and be a goldfish and just circle back and try again. And Peter, I haven't read your book yet. I look forward to that, but I was listening to both on your intro podcast. Joy, you nailed it. Like the word joy to me, if it's not joyful, if there isn't this fun and enjoy in what you're doing, then you do have to reevaluate how can you bring that back in, or how do you change that. Another word you used was awe, and I love that. I use that a lot as an example for our company, but also just personally pulling back to simplicity, right? Just what are those awe moments? And for us being in travel, we're so fortunate to go to these places that are based in nature and literally just put our feet in the sand or in the forest, or watch a sunset, and everyone can model that at some small way in their lives. And approachability you mentioned, so making a business approachable. To me, when we were founding the brand, it wasn't a luxury, the highest end retreat center or wellness where you go away for 10 days and go do that, and there's a place for that. But bringing it to day-to-day approachability of, I'm still gonna, back in the old days, you go on a business trip or something and eat terribly, not sleep, go out late, but bringing everyday living to travel, whether it's for leisure or business, is available, right? And so allowing to eat healthy, allowing those spaces to go do yoga, allowing, the meditative places on property, just knowing where those are, to point them out, to go on an all walk around. I think that is what fuels me, is that everybody can do that.
Well, and sorry, Anna, but what you're referring to goes back to Peter's question about risk, and you're now framing it as a calculated risk. And it's a risk that is introducing something new, but it's addressing an identified need. It's addressing an identified trend that isn't being met by existing businesses. And that's, again, it doesn't guarantee success in anything that you do, but one way to mitigate those risks, Peter, that you were just referring to, is to draw upon your experience, think about every step that we've taken in our careers to this date as a learning opportunity, and an opportunity to have a lens into what's working and what's not, and then addressing those things that aren't working in a way that is designed to work. Whether it actually does work or not is to be determined. But I think that's one way to respond to your question about risk. Risk is good, but calculated risk is far better than just winging it without any plan, even though I do that a lot too.
Yeah. That's for sure. I think we've kind of these topics that we're talking about now sometimes drift into things like luck, or things like, that Malcolm Gladwell book, Outliers, that you show up in an era, and the examples in Gladwell's book about the hockey players who are born on Sundays, whatever that is. Why is that a significant key to success? Totally random. But there is, I still struggle with this word luck. When I look at my life personally, and the luck or the coincidence or the synchronicities, even this podcast, the synchronicities to make this happen, I couldn't have planned this. I couldn't have calculated that it's going to, and we're not doing this to create success in the short term. The gift that keeps me excited about coming here is the community that we're building. Yeah. And it's in your logo, it's in your name. Yeah. Community is part of it. This is exactly why we're doing it. There's a certain prosperity in building this type of community with people that are aligned in a similar
value system,
orientation for kindness, joy. It's
and Peter, in the end, isn't that everybody?
It is.
Isn't that truly everybody? We are convinced through media and other forms of inputs that we're all receiving and being bombarded with, that we're different from that person, and they're wrong and we're right, and they're bad and we're good. And in the end, we sort of reject that whole notion. We believe that being kind is not a political statement. Being good to the planet is not a political, taking care of ourselves. Everybody wants to live a lifestyle that's grounded in those values. And so, I think we've actually hit on a common thread among, our entire society, that we're trying to be convinced that doesn't exist, but it truly does. And one of our, I think, most important jobs is to draw that out and remind people that we're here to support a political system, a religious system, a philosophy. We're here just to root for and support humankind. And the concept that you touched on about connections, and that's another way to think about community, right? Is connections. I love that we're seeing each other face to face and that we're interacting here. But like yesterday, we drove up to LA and we had lunch with a person in our business that we hadn't seen for a long time. So much better to have those personal connections. So much more important to have in real life, face-to-face interactions, especially unscripted ones. I like to talk about being around the fire, clinking glasses, reflecting on the day's adventures and what have you. It's those unscripted moments that are some of the most profound that we experience in our lives. And we do that often with people that we've never met before. And we just, and they shape our lives. That's an exciting thing about our business and our industry in general. Think what you will about AI and where it's headed, and there's certainly some scary things about where technology is taking us. But if you look back at any time period over the history of mankind, things are better today than they were 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago. There are certain elements of life that are not better. But in total, if you sum up education rates, infant mortality rates, access to healthcare, access to food, access to clean water, it's all improved. Prosperity levels have all improved over the course of the last 50, 60, 70, 100 years. And they're going to continue to now improve probably at an exponential level. That's a really exciting thing, because what it's going to do is free people up now to revert back to those core values, those fundamental groundings that underpin all of us as human beings. And I believe it will lead to more of the types of experiences, Pam, that you were describing, where people are going to be able to go out and partake, Peter, in your retreats in Mendocino and not be half in the room and half out of the room thinking about, what business transaction they got to be working on and so on. They can be much more oriented around the basis of our humanity. And to me, there's something that's just incredibly energizing and exciting about that notion. And I realize that the path isn't going to be a straight one, but it certainly seems to us that we're on a very positive trend as a society.
Agree.
Yeah, there's so many things you just said, and there's so many entry points into this conversation, and I'm thinking in my own mind. How about you, Krystal? Are you thinking in your own mind?
Well, you're thinking, I
Points.
had a speaking coach once that said, Ken, you need to stop talking in paragraphs.
Yeah, well, it's really good. It's the same as me. My wife would say the same. I'm kind of parroting my wife right now. This. I'm just going to try and pinpoint one entry here. Failure is not what a lot of people have been led to believe. Failure, in a way, is a necessary step in this mastery of any effort, any art, any profession. And on a macro scale, I love hearing you speak with enthusiasm and sincerity about everything's going up. And in the macro picture, I definitely believe, and Pam, this idea of believing. Have you read The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton?
I have not read The Biology of Belief.
He's a scientist, and he's
I know
now
his name.
kind of a yogi, and he's on the yoga tours, giving talks in India. He was in India the last time I was there. This idea of belief, and it is my belief as well, that these times that we're living in, are they unprecedented? No, suffering has always been a part of the human experience. But at the scale and the way technology is interfacing, I think this is unprecedented, what we're living in right now. And are we up for the challenge of living in this environment that is in many sectors decaying? Many sectors of life, culture, institutions are in these decaying states. But who are the people that can recognize, like this idea of failure, that this decay is also a necessary component of growth? And that, to me, is the journey of the inner teacher. That I say resistance is the inner teacher.
Yeah.
It's like evolution. When as a species, when we get to a place where the environment is not supporting us, we either go extinct or we adapt, we evolve. And I think, my belief, we're in that moment right now, especially with AI. Is the human species going to be irrelevant in the future. Well, there's a real possibility, if you watch the Matrix movies, there's a real
Right.
possibility that might be the lesson we have to learn.
Yeah.
Hopefully not.
Crystal, do you want to go, or I can?
Mine are really short. I'm the efficient one, and I.
Get the men off the screen. Let the women talk.
Yeah, you guys.
So Israel's always telling me this story, which I'm going to butcher, but I can't remember if it was like the Chinese wise man or if it was an emperor who was jailed. And then he would often ask the guard, like, how's it going outside? And the guy would say, like, oh, it's real bad. And he'd be like, good, good, good. Because the worse it gets, it means it's only a matter of time before things get so bad that something turns and then everything gets better again.
Yeah.
Because life is the heartbeat.
Catalytic.
I believe we're in a time of upgrade, and I do believe that decay is necessary. So if you look at some institutions, and it's not even the politics of it, it's people who've been on a medical journey. If anybody's gone through any hard times in medically, they will seek out new ways of looking at something, right? So similarly, when that is effective, and some of them go back to the core of yoga, right? It's like looking within, it's not just a medication, right? So all of this, I believe, is rising for a reason right now, and that we do need all of this. And when we look at nature, like you said, Peter, nature is going to outlast all of the human race if we're not going to adapt, because nature adapts, right? A new species comes out of it because they had to. And if we don't adapt, we will be extinct. And I don't know if you follow Zach Bush at all, but I appreciate a lot of what he talks about tied with nature. And looking at when we design with nature, I know you have an architecture background, when we design with nature versus against, there's so much more value that comes for ourselves, for our communities, and our planet. So health-wise, mental-wise, spiritually. And I really appreciated your calling this the inner teacher. And I think that for me, when I reflect, outer teachers helped push me into my own inner teacher, in the sense that highlighting things, whether it be readings or other suggestions, and then that spawned more of my own growth. And, that's a journey I love. And it's lifelong learning. In our SCP way, we talk about growth mindset versus fixed mindset every day. I just love learning from folks like you, and paying that forward, and also taking it internally. Because bottom line, if we, starting with self, again, the whole premise of our company name, Soul Community Planet. And I so appreciate, I have a lot to learn about yoga, but I just really enjoy when they continue to say, don't be critical of self, self-love, like bringing that out is so important. And that reflects back in the world, right? On what you can attract, not only for yourself, but just taking care of yourself.
So I'm going to plant a little seed in you, Pam.
Okay.
What are you doing the third week in August?
Oh, I'm going to come to Peter's retreat.
Yeah,
Let's
well,
go.
I would love to share some time with you on a yoga mat.
That would be great.
I've got the luxury of having experienced you guys through your facilities and through your staff and through that community you've built. And I think it's only polite to pay back that.
Let's go.
Perfect.
That would be
On my
terrific.
way.
And if I can just coattail on these comments that were just made, I think all three of you said something super profound that sort of weaves back into what we're all doing, the calling that we've each chosen to follow, and what we're building. And it's back to, Peter, you mentioned the movie The Matrix, right? And we talked about how AI is changing our world more rapidly than anybody has ever experienced these types of sweeping changes. Earlier this year, I wrote a letter to my 4 daughters on Valentine's Day, and it was sort of Dad's 12 rules to live by. And the last one was about this concept, and it was simply, life is easy, life is going to get easier. People will tell you it's hard. It's much easier than it's been for any generation preceding us. Now, hear me out. What you do with that is really important and critical. There are so many people now that find life to be easy, and they're resorting to escapism. They're escaping to their phones. They're escaping to drugs or other activities that are self-destructive. You see this on the streets of many of our big cities, where people, unfortunately, are suffering from these steps that have gone down a very, very dark road, over the course of time, that has resulted in people no longer part of this amazing experience that we've all been gifted. And so one of the things that we're doing with Soul Community Planet, whether it's intentional or subconsciously, is we're providing a medium for people to address that ability to escape, the fact that we are more prosperous, we have more access to so many different things. So now instead of choosing to do drugs or get a better video screen to watch your escapist videos, get out in the real world when you need to escape. Go surfing, go to one of your yoga retreats, go swimming, lay in the grass and just breathe. Those are the types of things that I was trying to point out to my daughters, that this life that we're all given is just such a miracle. And to be able to wake up every day and be able to access that. You talked about luck a moment ago, Peter. Think about it. How, relative to any generation or virtually any society that exists on Earth today, the four of us are extremely, extremely fortunate, extremely lucky. Luck, and what we do with that luck, though, is up to us. And how we value that luck is up to us. And I think if there's one way to crystallize what we're engaged in here with building this business, it's to hopefully help people act on the fact that they are so lucky and be able to do things that are embracing planet Earth, themselves, and society in a little bit more thoughtful way.
I appreciate you saying those things. When I think about the companies that share this kind of mission, Patagonia, obviously, that they had that commitment. I built Manduka with Patagonia as a model. And even when I stepped down and sold my majority share in the company, I really fought to keep the company in San Luis Obispo because of what Chenard was doing with Patagonia. And I was unsuccessful. But your business is refreshing because I don't meet too many hospitality companies that actually are living what they're selling. There's a lot of wellness being sold right now, but it's not integral into the corporate ethos.
Yeah.
You guys have it. And I thank you also for admitting that you're still learning, and that's beautiful. I have so much space for people, for companies that at least are making an effort. And your company is one of those companies.
That means a lot. And one of the things, not to get too far into the details of our industry, but one of the things that's enabling us to move in the right direction a little bit more effectively than some of the companies is that we're vertically integrated. So we have our brand, our management company, and our real estate, the assets themselves, all under one roof. And unfortunately, one of the impediments to innovation and change within our industry is based on the fact that most of the times there's a different brand, there's a different management company, and there's a different real estate company that are involved in any given hotel or resort that you stay at. The end result is the depth of what they're able to offer, the ability to pivot and navigate through changing needs, to provide something that is truly aligned with what people are looking for is much, much more difficult. If the brand says, hey, people really want to be more conscious when they're traveling, they want to be focused on wellness, they have to reach out to their independent ownership community and say, hey, we need to invest XYZ into your hotels in order to address these new consumer needs. And typically there's a bunch of pushback and it doesn't happen. Or they need to convince their third-party operators to run the hotels in a certain way that again, meets the need that's been identified. Very difficult, very inefficient process. And not that, again, I love to repeat this, we're never going to be perfect. We're always striving to be better. So I don't want to represent that we've got it all figured out. But at least we have a medium and sort of a format for our business that enables us to be a little bit more adroit to react to or proactively act on needs that we're identifying. And that's served us well to date, and hopefully that'll continue to be one of our advantages going forward.
Krystal, I have one more thing to say, and then I'll be quiet. I want to share a little story here about my experience with the both of you, Ken and Pam, and I think it's a beautiful story. When you guys first reached out to me, there was, I can't even remember the how. I think somehow Courtney had come across me and introduced us. And there was a communication that you were interested to talk and also were interested in the fact that I had this architecture career. And so I happened to be, I don't know, for some reason I was talking to one of your facility guys, and the next thing you know, you guys paid for me to fly up there to kind of give an assessment of your facilities, which I did, and I loved, and I got to experience your property before I actually taught there, which was huge. And, the architect brain in me was like thinking, oh my God, this is going to be a perfect place for a sauna room and all these things that you've already identified. But there's, it's an existing facility, and there's choices and risk and all that other stuff. And the solution that we ended up with, because the deadlines were looming, and I wasn't party to what was going on within your company, and the initiative kind of waned, but then this guy shows up out of nowhere with portable saunas on the beach. And now, to me, that's a signature service that I just love. And and for those listeners out there interested in this Mendocino retreat, the hotel is a 5-minute walk to the beach, and they have set up these wood-fired tent saunas that are 10 feet from the ocean, so you can alternate in between hot sessions in the sauna and going out into this Northern California cold current Mendocino. And
cool.
We support that process with these body scrubs and juices and fresh fruit, to hydrate in between the sessions. And it's just like, don't change that.
I just love to say that I would love for anybody to think about problem solving and to say what's possible, because we use that a lot in our company. And I remember, Peter, some of those conversations, and I said to the team, let's get a portable sauna. Like, why not?
Right.
And so literally just problem solving, when you may hit a wall, it becomes this beautiful experience. It was like way even better than anybody could have imagined. So I just love for everybody to think in whatever business they're in, or just what's possible, because you don't have to do the traditional. And the experience
that
changes.
lesson has been a lesson in my life. Like my dad taught me this, is like every obstacle is an opportunity.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that from my dad. And,
I just have one thing that I want to ask you guys, so that we can end with a little bit of humor. We didn't get to go too much into the challenges, but maybe if you could share a blooper, like what was a really funny moment that wasn't funny in the moment, but now looking back, when you followed your inner teacher, you laughed.
How much time do we have? I've
about 3 minutes.
I've got a bunch, but you want me to start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I can start, because there's just so many of them. We have somebody gave us a plaque one time that said, it has quotes and it says, "I'm just gonna wing it," said Ken Cruse about something he definitely shouldn't be winging. And that's a great way to describe sort of how I think about business. And that's why I love the example that you just gave, Peter and Pam, and talking about these perceived impediments. And it's, okay, yeah, you're right. We don't have the permitting to build a brand new sauna within this time frame. How are we going to solve this problem? And you guys quickly and creatively solved the problem in a way that's probably vastly more memorable than a regular sauna. So that's pretty cool. But there's been so many of those instances when I've done the ready, shoot, aim, and it's not worked out well. An example is we have this beautiful property on the Central Oregon coast, which is iconic in its own right. It's well known in the Pacific Northwest in particular. And it was built in the 60s. And so because of that, it had a great heritage and a ton of stakeholders and folks who loved the property. When we bought it, it was in need of fresh, innovative leadership, new capital, change in the business model and all that good stuff, which was absolutely true. But a lot of the things that we wanted to do, for example, to create an arboreal experience in these beautiful old Sitka spruce trees, were met with points of resistance that we didn't anticipate. And I remember having a town hall meeting, and I talked about this idea that we're going to create this great arboreal experience. And the interpretation by the local community was that you're building a roller coaster in the trees, and you're going to destroy nature through doing this. I also talked about how beautiful it was that time of year with this ballroom full of like 500 people. They all came because we gave them free drinks and free food, but we wanted to tell the story and sort of win over their hearts and minds. And in my effort to win over their hearts and minds, I was talking about how naturally spectacular the Oregon coast was, and how the Scotch broom was just blooming everywhere. And every single person in the audience just rolled their eyes and just audibly groaned. And it turns out afterwards, I found out that Scotch broom is a noxious, invasive weed that actually takes over the forest and prevents the real trees from growing and creates fire risk and all this stuff. So when we introduced food, we wanted to do a full vegan restaurant at this property. And same thing there. We were just punched right between the eyes on that one. It's like, you can't come to the Oregon coast and do something that extreme that quickly. We have to take people, baby steps along the way. So the idea that we were going to flip the switch and convert our restaurant to a vegan restaurant was humorous in how outspoken the guests were about that being a terrible idea. But I think to our credit, we pivoted and took a step in the right direction, just not all the steps that we ultimately wanted to go to.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
Well, this hour has definitely gone by quicker than I wanted it to go. So that means we have to have you back on for the second season.
Please,
Would love to. We're so grateful that you invited us to be part of this show, and we're inspired by the work that you're doing, and just sort of humbling to even be considered as guests on your show, and to hear your comments about your reflections on what we're building. The feeling is very mutual, and it's an honor to be here.
Yeah. Well, it's my honor to work with you guys in any capacity. I've said that, and I think you know that. So we look forward to having you back.
And is your book available now, Peter, everywhere?
Yeah. I mean, everywhere that's called Amazon.
Amazon.com.
We want to put it, we have an SCP library. I want to include it.
Yeah,
so,
we'll include that in our library.
I think, well, in Mendocino, I think I left one for Nikki. But yeah, no, I would love it if there was a library in each one of your properties, and I can send you those books. You don't even need to buy them. Yeah.
No, we have a library. That's one of our brand standards. We're going to make sure your book is there, and you don't need to send them to us. Well,
okay, great.
We're happy to get them.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
We'll put it in. We'll put the
Thank
link
you.
in the description of this video.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much.
Okay. Thank
We'll see you. That's it for this episode. Be well and stay open to the teacher within. If you've enjoyed our time together, follow or subscribe and stay tuned for upcoming chats you don't want to miss.